Only the Aldmeri, the High Elves and their noble allies, the Wood Elves and Catmen, have the wisdom and restraint to peaceably rule the disparate peoples of Tamriel. Though we are reluctant to take up this burden, events have shown that we must. Recent events prove that the Dragon Break was not a unique event. Men always follow the destructive path of their defender and apologist, the missing god whom we shall not name. This ends here. Once again, elves shall rule Tamriel from White Gold Tower, this time forever. The world has gone wrong, and we must put it right. March proudly beneath the eagle banner of the Aldmeri Dominion. A quote from Icantar of Shimmerine. The Aldmeri Dominion is the leading authority of Elven rule, with its roots and origin in the Summerset Isles, currently known as Alinor. There have been 3 dissonant establishments of the Aldmeri Dominion throughout history. The first, second, and third Aldmeri Dominions each have their own histories, beliefs, and structures. Although each iteration, their primary goal has been to establish the idea and foothold of Elven rule of Tamriel. Between the years of 580 and 582 of the Second Era is when the first Aldmeri Dominion was developed by Queen Iren Arana Aldmeri. The first Aldmeri Dominion was also referred to the brainchild of Queen Iren. Before she was queen, however, she roamed much of Tamriel as an adventurer, and had seen the likes of each province and the conditions they were in. After a lengthy journey across Tamriel, Iren had witnessed Tamriel as it was, and after her journey back home, and she had been crowned queen, she sought to establish Elven rule over Tamriel. She believed that with the threats Tamriel was facing, it was in her people's duty to take leadership and responsibility over it. During this time, the Bosmeri and Khajiit people were facing much of the same problems as the Altmer, and were in need of power and an ally. After the news of the imperial city getting overrun by worshippers of Molag Bal, Queen Iren quickly reached out to the other provinces, Valenwood and elsewhere, for an alliance. This is not the first time they have ever allied with one another. As many times throughout history, they have made alliances before during times of strife. Iren knew of the imminent disaster that was to come, and this alliance is what guided them through the next few years during the Plane Meld. Iren had inherited the throne as queen from her father, King Hidalith, who had passed away. Queen Iren is one of the youngest in history as a leader of Mer, considering that Mer races typically live quite long. She was a mere 25 years old when she took the title of Queen on the 7th of Frostfall in the Second Era 580. Although she was quite young and inexperienced, her intellect proved otherwise. She was told to be principled and inventive, although she was quite stubborn. Collectively, the king of the Bosmeri people, King Eredin, alongside the Sylvanar and the Green Lady, and the Main of Elsewhere, assisted Queen Iren as ruling heads of the Aldmeri Dominion. The emergence of the first Aldmeri Dominion brought out the cultures and power of the Summerset Isles to the rest of Tamriel for one of the first times in history, as the Altmer had always been exclusive and isolated in their own territory of the Isles, not allowing foreigners on their land and dealing with their own problems solely. Iren believed that because of the recurring catastrophes that were infecting Tamriel, they happened during the time that humans were in control, and she believed it was in her power to right the wrongs of the former rulers of Tamriel. She believed that the younger races were not fit to rule because of their youth and inexperience, and with the power of the divines, she believed it was in her right to carry this out. I have no hatred for the races of man, but they are young. Like all children, they are driven by emotion. They lack the wisdom that comes with age. I would sooner place an Altmer infant on the ruby throne than surrender Tamriel to their capricious whims. The Altmer, the Bosmer, and the Khajiit share the common traits of intelligence, patience, and reason. We do not seek riches or plunder. Domination is not our goal, nor is the acclamation of power for its own sake. Today we make our stand. Today we take back the ruby throne, which is ours by ancient right and the blessings of the divines. Stand with us. A quote from Queen Irene Arana Aldmeri. Queen Irene allied the Summerset Isles with Valenwood and elsewhere through a treaty known as the Elden Accord, setting in stone the first Aldmeri Dominion. The capital of the first Aldmeri Dominion was Elden Root, in Valenwood, protected from the vast forests of Valenwood. The first Aldmeri Dominion, collectively, was controlled by Irene the Thalmor, Altmeri Cannon Reeves, Bosmeri Tree Thanes, and Khajiit chieftains. Irene held no discrimination against the other two races who were included in the Aldmeri Dominion, a concept that has seemingly been forgotten by the latest Third Aldmeri Dominion of the Fourth Era. The Aldmeri Dominion symbol is that of an eagle. For centuries, this symbol has been used to define the Altmer and the Summerset Isles, as an eagle represents their ancestors of the Aedra, who flew down from the heavens and established on Nirn, only to be trapped in physical form after Nirn had taken its true and solid form in the plains. With the skill of the Bosmer as gifted archers, they took a perfect place along the Aldmeri Dominion's warriors, and were experts in defense strategies. The Bosmer had also made their own symbol of the Aldmeri Dominion, which was a symbol representing the Green Pact made with the deity Y'ffre, their most venerated deity of their pantheon. The Khajiit had been decimated by the fatal Khanahatan flu that had ravaged Tamriel. Queen Irene had stepped in and helped the Khajiiti people restructure themselves following the chaos and horrors of the disease, and helped restore order. The Khajiit see this as a more than reasonable deduction to side with the Aldmeri Dominion. The Khajiit are skilled warriors in many ways, and were the strong arm for the Aldmeri Dominion. The Khajiit also held their own symbol for the Aldmeri Dominion as well, depicting the twin moons, Joan and Jode as known to the Khajiit, as well as the claws of the Khajiit. By the end of the 580th year of the Second Era, Tamriel had entered a war known as the Alliance War, and the Aldmeri Dominion was just one of 3 of the military factions that joined this war, seated alongside the Daggerfall Covenant, which consisted of Hammerfell, High Rock, and the Orcs of Orsinium, and the Ebonheart Pact, which consisted of Skyrim, Morrowind, and Blackmarsh. The goal of this war was to claim the Ruby Throne and rule Tamriel. Each faction was to make sure that the other faction was to not gain control. Although the first Aldmeri Dominion was successfully created between the Summerset Isles, Valenwood, and elsewhere, there were still those who did not agree with the Aldmeri Dominion's ways, especially among the more traditional Bosmeri tribes. The first Aldmeri Dominion's ideals were preserving Elven heritage, establishing Elven rule, to watch over the younger races they deemed unfit to rule. However, this has never truly been operated in full, even up to the modern Third Aldmeri Dominion. The outcome of the Alliance War is not truly known, but with the knowledge of there being a second Aldmeri Dominion, sometime later within that same era, it can be assumed that the first one eventually dissipated and fell apart, likely with the death of Irene at some point in time. In the late First Era was when Cameron and Exemes of Valenwood had signed a treaty between Valenwood and the Aldmeri Council. This treaty was to last for 1,000 years, and later, during the ongoing interregnum of the Second Era 830, the heirs of the throne in Valenwood began fighting over the title to the throne. A faction in Valenwood decided to offer a portion of Valenwood's territory to Calovia, to exchange for support of their own claim to the throne. However, this violated the treaty that was made many centuries ago by their ancestor between Valenwood and the Aldmeri Council, and a war between Valenwood and the Summerset Isles ensued. The Aldmeri Dominion quickly dispelled the Calovians, and the heirs to the throne of Valenwood were dealt with as well. The King of Alinor had quickly taken over Valenwood with use of the Thalmor, and the Second Aldmeri Dominion was born in this process. This establishment was around 300 or so years after the establishment of the First Aldmeri Dominion. Even though this may be considered a defeat of sorts for Valenwood, this in fact was proven much better than the chaos that had ensued in their country beforehand. Tamriel was divided between the Aldmeri Dominion and the Empire, although the Thalmor had their own holdings and representatives within the imperial city as well. The capital during the First Aldmeri Dominion had been Elden Root, but was now changed to Fallenesti. Over the next several decades, the Thalmor and the Aldmeri Dominion grew stronger in Valenwood, although Bosmeri tribes continued their clashes along the Calovian border. During this time, the Aldmeri Dominion had also made some rather unexpected allies with some tribes of Reachmen, the Mauimer of Pyandonia, and once again with elsewhere. The Second Aldmeri Dominion was actually the most stable power in Tamriel during its time, however quickly taken out by Tiber Septim. While the Second Aldmeri Dominion was gaining strength, so too was Tiber Septim. He had begun his conquest of Tamriel, and his forces began approaching Dominion Domain. This caused the Valenwood and Calovian skirmishes to dwindle. The Elven forces were not as well equipped on land as they were in water. Their navies were able to resist across the Cape of the Blue Divide to the Topol Bay. However, there was no actual declaration of war between the Empire and the Aldmeri Dominion during this time, and Tamriel was in a state of confusion and chaos. Tiber's use of the Numidium quickly brought an end to this chaos, though, in the Second Era 896. And lastly, the Summerset Isles had been conquered. For centuries, as the Dragonborn Emperors were in control, the Aldmeri Dominion hadn't seen the likes of Elven rule until after the Oblivion Crisis. The conquest of the Summerset Isles by Tiber Septim is remembered by many living Altmer of modern times, and is one of the most horrific events of the Summerset Isles to have occurred. This tragedy is not forgotten nor forgiven by many Altmer who hail from the Summerset Isles, making the Third Aldmeri Dominion the most hostile of the three Aldmeri Dominions. Tiber Septim's original plan for attempting to conquer the Summerset Isles was to send his Archmage, Zurin Arctis, to the King of Alinor, to establish some kind of peace in a non-hostile way. However, after the invasion of Morrowind, the pieces of the Numidium began to come together, and the thought of taking the Summerset Isles by force became a much more desired option as more research had surfaced on the Numidium, discovering the true power of the Numidium. The Thalmor were quickly taken out by Tiber Septim's armies, and the Bosmer grew to despise the Empire, as they had never truly been ruled by another authority other than their own or the Aldmeri Dominion. During the crisis, the Crystal Tower was forced to give the Thalmor greater power and authority. Their efforts almost certainly saved Summerset Isle from being overrun. They capitalized on their success to seize total control in the 4th Era 22. A quote from Legate Justianus Quintius. After the destruction that the Oblivion Crisis had caused, the whole of Tamriel was weakened, save for the Argonians. The Empire had taken a swift and heavy blow to their reign, with the deaths of the Emperor Uriel Septim VII, Prince Geldal Septim, Prince Ebel Septim, and Prince Enman Septim were all assassinated by the cult of the Mythic Dawn, the very cult that brought about the Oblivion Crisis. The Oblivion Crisis did not only affect Cyrodiil. This event opened gates across the whole of Tamriel, including the homeland of the Altmer. The Altmer, because of their powerful wizards with expertise of Oblivion realms and magic, were able to close the gates much more successfully than many parties of warriors in Cyrodiil. However, hordes of Daedra had outnumbered the Altmer and overthrew their defenses. The seat of power in the Summerset Isles during this time was the rulership governed from the Crystal Tower. During this time as well, the Thalmor were a radical group who were another faction in the Summerset Isles that desired control of the province. Cornered and with nowhere else to go, the ruling bodies of the Summerset Isles gave control to the Thalmor, as they had been the most successful in closing the gates and fighting back the Daedric hordes, until the champion of Cyrodiil and Martin Septim were able to seal the Oblivion Crisis with the power of Akatosh, Martin Septim, and the Amulet of Kings. This is when it was a ripe opportunity for the Aldmeri Dominion to once again take control of the Summerset Isles. This was the rise of the 3rd Aldmeri Dominion, and it has lasted well into the 4th Era. Following the Oblivion Crisis, the Thalmor exploited their success and fame during the Oblivion Crisis, and were able to quickly overrun the Isles. They claimed to have single-handedly ended the crisis, and while they were a helping hand in the Summerset Isles, many knew they were not the truest and only saviors of Tamriel. What was left of the imperial government in the Summerset Isles was quickly demolished, and the Empire needed time to recover from the events of the Oblivion Crisis. The Thalmor were quickly able to take over the Summerset Isles, renaming it Alinor, and setting in stone the 3rd Aldmeri Dominion. Since there were no longer any heirs to the throne of the Empire, the High Chancellor Okado of the Elder Council had to become the potentate and new ruler of the Empire. However, the leadership of High Chancellor Okado did not last long, as Thalmor assassins were able to assassinate him only 10 years into the 4th Era. This ignited a civil war among Cyrodiil to break out, known as the Stormcrown Interregnum. Chaos also ensued in the Summerset Isles, with the Thalmor killing anyone who was of non-Mer descent who lived on the Isles, and seemingly anyone who rivaled their power. Titus Mede during this time was also a great enemy of the Thalmor, who was able to successfully conquer Cyrodiil and establish a new empire, and was then crowned Emperor Titus Mede I. High Rock, Skyrim, Cyrodiil, Elsewhere, and Valenwood were once again controlled by the Empire, but this did not sit well with the Thalmor or last very long. In the 29th year of the 4th Era, the Bosmeri people who sided with the Aldmeri Dominion overthrew the governmental holds of the Empire in Valenwood, and Valenwood had ceded with the territory of the Aldmeri Dominion. Although this was no easy task, as many Bosmer sided with the Empire as well. These allied Bosmer aided the Empire in defending their position in Valenwood. This is the first of many clashes that the Empire truly had with the Aldmeri Dominion, and got a first taste of how actually strong the Dominion was, comparative to the Empire at the time. The Aldmeri Dominion and its sympathizers were fruitful in driving out the Empire and those who sided with it, solidifying Valenwood's position as part of the Aldmeri Dominion. The Third Aldmeri Dominion was established in the Fourth Era 29. However, this group appears much more radical and nationalist in their beliefs, as they truly and wholeheartedly believe Altmeri kind supreme above all other races, including those who they've allied with in the past, and especially despise the races of men. Although after this is when the Aldmeri Dominion had cut communicational ties with the rest of Tamriel, as a civil war of sorts broke out amongst Mer, who despised what the Aldmeri Dominion was doing, and those who favored the Aldmeri Dominion. Despite the attempts of rebels, the Dominion succeeded, and anchored itself within Alinor and Valenwood. Opposition of the Thalmor was met with severe punishment, even against those who were Altmer or in territories governed by the Aldmeri Dominion. In one instance, in the Fourth Era 42, rebels who disagreed with the beliefs of the Thalmor were attacked by the Thalmor, and they fled to the city of Sentinel in Hammerfell. This event was known as the Night of Green Fire, because of the magical attacks that the Thalmor had used on these rebels. Imperial forces had arrived in Sentinel, although they were too late, as the refugee district of the city had been decimated, and all who opposed, including the rebels, were slaughtered. In Valenwood, it is known that the Aldmeri Dominion regularly carries out what is known as purges against the Bosmer in Valenwood, as they still view their elven cousins as racially inferior. It isn't known what the Bosmer in Valenwood think of the Aldmeri Dominion. It can be assumed that it is quite split, though, as in Skyrim, a Bosmer laborer to the Thalmor, named Malborn, despises the Thalmor because they needlessly murdered his family. Not much occurred for some 70 years, and the Aldmeri Dominion had gone silent on the rest of Tamriel. The Empire could only suspect that the Summerset Isles was facing a governmental crisis of some kind. That is, until the Fourth Era 98, when the twin moons Masser and Secunda suddenly vanished from the sky. For the most part, most of Tamriel was met with confusion and worry. However, in Elsewhere, it was a much different story. The twin moons play a vital role in Khajiit religion, the way in which they take their form at birth. Moon sugar and nearly every form of Khajiit life was confined to the phases and existence of the twin moons. Upon their vanishment, Elsewhere had gone into a quick state of chaos and anarchy, until 2 years later, the moons had suddenly and mysteriously reappeared in the sky. The Thalmor quickly took claim to their reappearance, claiming they used previously thought forgotten dawn magics. This quickly gained the immediate favor of the Aldmeri Dominion from the Khajiit. However, it isn't quite known if the Thalmor were true in these claims, or if they too knew nothing about the moon's sudden disappearance and reappearance. Ultimately, Elsewhere quickly joined sides with the Aldmeri Dominion, saying that the Thalmor were true heroes of Khajiit kind, as client states of the Dominion, the Northern Iniquina and the Southern Palatine, a reunification of the Aldmeri Dominion between the Altmer, Bosmer, and Khajiit that hadn't been seen for hundreds of years. With 2 nations lost from the Empire, this caught the Empire's attention, and with 2 nations gained, the Aldmeri Dominion were assured that they could now face the Empire if they so desired, in which they did. This conquest and war against the Empire hadn't been seen since the years preceding Tiber Septim's conquests of Tamriel. Before the Great War had officially set in, the Blades for years had been secretly investigating what the Aldmeri Dominion was up to. Although despite their efforts, the Aldmeri Dominion was aware of this, and quickly and efficiently hunted down every last Blade who were stationed in either of the 3 countries that the Aldmeri Dominion occupied. For the next several years of the 4th Era, tension grew between the Aldmeri Dominion and the Empire. This built up to the 30th of Frostfall, in which the Aldmeri Dominion came to Emperor Titus Mede II with a highly decorated wagon as if bringing gifts. But Titus was met with a requisition and an ultimatum. This demand included stipulations of a large sum of gold to be given to the Aldmeri Dominion, disbandment of the Blades, the outlaw of the worship of Talos, and surrendering territory of Hammerfell to the Aldmeri Dominion. Despite his military generals warning Mede of their current weakness as a militant empire, Titus Mede II rejected this requisition from the Aldmeri Dominion. What happened next was a grisly sight to be seen. The Thalmor representatives had overturned the decorated wagon, and out of it came tumbling the hundreds of heads of every Blades agent that was stationed in the Summerset Isles, Valenwood, and elsewhere. This is the spark that ignited the Great War. After Mede rejected the ultimatum from the Aldmeri Dominion, the Dominion's armies quickly swarmed Cyrodiil from the borders of elsewhere, with Lord Narifin at its forefront. They cut a bloody mark across the southeast of Cyrodiil, laying siege first at the city of Leyawiin, which had fallen quickly to Narifin's forces. They quickly made their way to the city of Breville, north of Leyawiin, and in a similar manner and severity, besieged it. The whole of southern Cyrodiil had quickly been taken by the Aldmeri Dominion. During this time, Hammerfell was also under attack, led by Lady Aranelia. They had cut through southern Cyrodiil from the borders of Valenwood, and marched straight into the coastline of Hammerfell, assisted by reinforcements who arrived from Alinor from the shores of Hammerfell. This is when the infamous March of the Thirst occurred, when the weakened Imperial and Redguard forces were forced to escape to safety across the expanse of the Alakir Desert. The Aldmeri Dominion had originally only wanted to take portions of Hammerfell, and after they began their attacks on Hammerfell, did they realize that the Empire was much weaker than they had previously thought, and the judgment came that they could shoot for a further objective, the total domination of Tamriel. With these victories, the Aldmeri Dominion turned their gaze to the Imperial City. Titus Mede II knew his forces would not be able to protect the city, so he retreated north, and the city itself had fallen to the forces of the Dominion. Mede abandoned his people of the Imperial City, and the sacking of the Imperial City was violent and horrific, as the Aldmeri forces quickly crushed any and all who resisted, as the entire city's defenses had disappeared. This process of sacking the city had become known as the culling, as the Dominion had committed horrendous war crimes against the citizens of the Imperial City, reminiscent of Tiber Septim's conquest of the Summerset Isles. The Dominion's forces had seen this as an obvious victory and contacted Mede, awaiting his surrender. Mede used this time to gather his forces for a counterblow to the Dominion. Within 5 days, the Empire's forces were successfully able to drive back the Dominion, cornering them within the Imperial City at the Battle of the Red Ring. The Dominion attempted an escape from the city, but the Imperial Legion, guided by General Junna, had them outmatched. This was when the Dominion had finally been driven out and dismantled from Cyrodiil. Although this was a major defeat for the Aldmeri Dominion, the Empire was on its last limb, and this is when Titus Mede II had finally commenced through with the signing of the White Gold Concordat. With this treaty, the war had finally ended. The Concordat's terms listed a variety of requirements for peace: that Talos worship is outlawed, a large portion of southern Hammerfell was to be given to the Aldmeri Dominion, and the Blades were to be disbanded. Although the White Gold Concordat did not include the large sum of gold to be given to the Aldmeri Dominion, as the original requisition had. However, even with its near-identical requests, Titus Mede II still signed it, although with quite obvious hesitation and anguish. With that, a large section of southern Hammerfell was to be ceded to the Aldmeri Dominion. The Blades had been hunted out by the Aldmeri Dominion, and Talos worship was outlawed. Hammerfell did not agree to the terms of the Concordat, and so skirmishes between Hammerfell and the Aldmeri Dominion persisted for a few years, as Titus was forced to renounce Hammerfell as a province under the Empire. Although these skirmishes had eventually ended with the Treaty of Stros Makai, and the battles had reached an impasse. Some say that the Dominion was just as weak as the Empire by the time of the signing of the White Gold Concordat, as they withdrew from Hammerfell after 5 years and had seemingly given up. Although there are no military documents or sources that state this, and whether they were truly weakened by the ongoing war is up for debate. Many throughout Tamriel are critical to Mede's decisions that he made leading up to the Great War and during, with him rejecting the ultimatum in the first place to him signing it, as it had nearly identical terms as it had before. However, nearly all can agree that if the White Gold Concordat was never signed, it would have certainly spelled the end of the Empire. Because of the terms written in the White Gold Concordat, specifically the notions of ceding portions of southern Hammerfell with the Dominion, the Red Guards held a severe bitterness towards the Empire, seeing it as treachery and betrayal. The Thalmor are amused by this, and it falls into their favor of the two nations having contempt for one another. For the next 5 years, Hammerfell continued its clashes with the Dominion alone. Ulfric Stormcloak was responsible for the Markarth incident in Skyrim, and to reinforce the ban on Talos worship, the Aldmeri Dominion employed forces to take hold in Markarth. The ongoing and obvious Cold War between the Aldmeri Dominion and the Empire persists into the 2nd century of the 4th era. In Skyrim, the Thalmor establish their own embassy and capture those who they believe are worshippers of Talos, and even those who question their authority and beliefs. Skyrim, along with Hammerfell, were the countries in most opposition to the White Gold Concordat, Hammerfell being the parts notioning the ceding of their territory, and Skyrim's opposition being with the terms specifically notioning the outlaw of Talos worship. The Dominion established holdings in Skyrim to enforce the White Gold Concordat. During the 4th era, an initiate of the Thalmor named Ancano had been sent to the College of Winterhold as an advisor to the Archmage to establish a connection with the college and the Aldmeri Dominion. However, with the discovery of the Eye of Magnus, Ancano grew hungry for power regarding this artifact, but his plans were met with defeat by the Dragonborn. The Dragonborn had eventually made their way to the Thalmor embassy in Skyrim, as a guest to a party situated there. The Dragonborn's objective was to find any Thalmor secrets regarding their knowledge on the return of the dragons. The Dragonborn was able to breach the security of the embassy, and located dossiers discussing the ongoing crisis with the return of the dragons, Ulfric Stormcloak, and a remaining wanted member of the Blades named Esbern. The Thalmor were revealed to know nothing about the return of the dragons, but Esbern, whom they were searching for, did know about the return of the dragons. By the 201st year of the Fourth Era, the Empire and Skyrim had entered a civil war between Imperial loyalists and those who wished to secede with the side of the Stormcloaks. This conflict did not involve the Aldmeri Dominion directly, and even they were concerned about the outcome of this war, as a victory on either side would hinder the plans of the Aldmeri Dominion. Whatever the outcome of this civil war is, many believed a second war of sorts between the Dominion and the Empire is sure and inevitable, given the tension that is already present. Currently, the Aldmeri Dominion is despised across much of Tamriel, including many even in the homeland of the Summerset Isles. The ideas and morals of the current Aldmeri Dominion is up for debate. Some believe the Aldmeri Dominion can be trusted, but many believe that with full continental control of the Aldmeri Dominion, Tamriel's future is certain doom. One thing that is certain is that the original ideas of the first Aldmeri Dominion have been corrupted, squandered, and taken to extreme. The future of the political landscape of Tamriel is unclear, but one thing that is known is that the Aldmeri Dominion will certainly be involved, and likely in a violent manner once again.